Hi, my name is Don Barrar and I'm a realtor in Scottsdale, Arizona. This is part 2 of a 2-part series on home valuation. This time, I will show you how to value a resale property. In part 1 of this series, I discussed why online home value applications like Zillow and average price per square foot methods do a poor job of valuing homes. The average price per square foot method does a particularly poor job of valuation because it always makes the very bad assumption that the value of the land is zero. By making that assumption, the average price per square foot method can make a valuation error costing you tens of thousands of dollars. In part 1, I also showed how to separate the value of the land from that of the structure. Being able to separate these values is a critical element of home valuation. If you've not watched part 1, I suggest that you do it now, as it will provide you the fundamental concepts for valuing resale properties. To value a resale property, the first thing to do is to select comparisons. This is the most critical element of developing a good valuation model. The goal is to find comparisons that are as similar as possible to the subject property to minimize the number of adjustments. So, what makes a good comparison? Here are a few things to look for when selecting comparisons. Geography. The same subdivision, builder, if you can find them. Otherwise, keep it within a half a mile of the property being valued. For the balance of this video, I will refer to the property being valued as the subject property. Price. There is no point comparing a $1 million home to a $500,000 home. They are not the same thing. Lot size. Adjusting for lot size can be difficult. We want to make comparisons for similar houses, not attempt to value land. Time. Attempt to keep comparisons within about 6 months of the subject property. If this cannot be done, it may be necessary to adjust the value of the comparisons for time. Adjusting for time is beyond the scope of this video. I'll make another video in the future to show how to adjust comparison values for time. Number of interior levels. For single-level homes, only use single-level comparisons. For multi-level homes, only compare with other multi-level homes. Single and multi-level homes are different markets. In Arizona, single-level homes are more desirable and tend to be more expensive for the same living area. Living area. Attempt to find comparisons that have similar living areas. Comparisons that have a living area that are within about 500 square feet of the subject property are ideal. Swimming pool. If the property being valued has a pool, attempt to find comparisons that also have pools. This is one of the largest adjustments that can be made and should be avoided. View is difficult to adjust because it is subjective. If valuing a property that has a view, attempt to find comparisons that have similar views. Avoid this adjustment if possible because it can be large. Again, our goal is to find comparisons that are like the subject property to minimize the number of adjustments. The more adjustments made, the more likely our valuation model will be in error. One more thing. A minimum of 3 comparisons is required. However, I attempt to find and use as many good comparisons as possible. The more comparisons, the better will be the valuation model. Most likely, none of the comparisons will be identical to the subject property. Some will have better features and some, well, not as good. Hence, price adjustments need to be made to the selling price of the comparisons to make them more like the subject property. But by how much? Here are a few adjustment factors in the Phoenix metropolitan area for average priced homes. Other communities in the United States may differ. Lot size, $1 per square foot for buffer space. Swimming pool, somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000 depending on the home's value and how elaborate the pool. Many of you will be surprised by this low value. If you've ever been involved in the construction of a pool, you know they can cost much more. Spas, built-in, $5,000. Above ground, $2,500. Bathrooms, $10,000 for a full bath. A half bath gets $5,000. Bath upgrades, $5,000 to $10,000 per bath, depending on what improvements have been made. Garage bays, $10,000 per bay. Kitchen hard surface, $5,000. It does not matter if the granite is a basic Baltic brown, an expensive Paradiso, or quartz. All get a $5,000 adjustment. Cultured marble, tile, and even granite tile all have zero value for adjustment purposes. More expensive homes usually have upgraded countertops, and this adjustment will not be required. Cabinetry, $5,000. Only make this adjustment if you're certain. It's hard to tell from photographs whether the cabinetry is dovetail construction with a soft close mechanism. Look to the description. Honey oak cabinetry is generally not upgraded cabinetry and are most likely glued and stapled. Flooring, $5,000. Make this adjustment for travertine, faux wood porcelain, and large ceramic tiles. If it can be determined that the flooring is hardwood or engineered wood, make a $5,000 adjustment. A word of caution. One can be easily fooled by wood flooring in photographs. It may be Pergo, a vinyl picture of wood on particle board that has an adjustment value of 0. Backyards, $10,000 to $20,000. Make this adjustment if there's an elaborate built-in cooking area, fire pit, and seating area. This adjustment is very subjective. View, subjective. Try not to make this adjustment by selecting comparisons with similar views. These adjustments can be large. One more thing about adjustments. No single adjustment can exceed 10% of the underlying value of the comparison. Okay, let's put it all together by valuing a home where I represented the buyer. I've chosen a simple, single-level condominium and was fortunate to be able to find 5 terrific comparisons. First, assemble the subject and comparison data. As a realtor, I have access to the MLS and can download subject and comparison data. Then, I import this data into Microsoft Excel. Excel makes my life easy as I do this frequently. For the majority of you, it will be necessary to use a site such as Zillow to gather comparison data. I recommend putting your data into a worksheet like Excel to perform the analysis. At the top of the worksheet, set up an area that contains adjustment factors. These will be required later. The next section of the worksheet contains the subject and comparison data. The first row contains the column headers. The subject data being valued was performed on February 20th and has a living area of 2,081 square feet. Hard surface contains a 1 because it has granite countertops. Number of baths contains a 3 because there are 3 full baths. A 2 for garage because it has a 2-car garage. 1 for cabinetry because the home has upgraded cabinetry. And 1 for bath upgrades because one of the 3 baths was upgraded. Everywhere else there are zeros. Why? Because the subject property does not have any of these features. Next, populate the features for comparison 1. It was sold on December 10th, has a living area of 1,528 square feet, and a sales price of $350,000. It has 2 baths and a 2-car garage. The remaining features are populated with zeros because comparison 1 does not have any of these features. I'm going to quickly fill in the feature information for comparisons 2, 3, 4, and 5. Looking at the comparisons, all have selling dates that are within 6 months, and all have a living area within about 500 square feet of the subject property. This is an excellent comparison set. The next section of the worksheet is where adjustments are made to dollarize the difference in features. As before, the first row contains the column headers. The second row is for comparison 1 adjustments. There are no difference in lot sizes, so the adjustment for lot size is 0. Next is kitchen hard surface. From the table of properties, it can be seen that the subject has a 1 because it has granite countertops. The comparison has laminate countertops, so it received a 0 for this feature. To calculate the adjustment for kitchen hard surface, do the following. Adjustment for hard surface equals 1 for the subject property minus 0 for the comparison times $5,000 for the hard surface adjustment factor. This equals a $5,000 adjustment that is placed in the cell that contains the adjustment for hard surface. In general, if the subject has a feature that is better than the comparisons, then the adjustment is added to the comparison's price. And if the subject lacks a feature that the comparison has, then the adjustment is subtracted from the comparison's price. I will do another feature adjustment in a moment. Continue populating comparison 1's feature price adjustments. Once all the adjustments have been made, add them up and place them in the total adjustments column. In this instance, $25,000. Then, add the total adjustments of $25,000 to the selling price of $350,000. This is $375,000, and that goes in the column for adjusted value. Finally, calculate the value per square foot. This is done by taking the adjusted value of $375,000 and dividing by the living area of 1,528 square feet. This results in $245 per square foot, and that goes in the dollar per square foot column. I'm going to quickly populate the remaining comparison property adjustments. Comparison 5 has an interesting situation where the flooring of the subject property is not as good as the comparison. Why? Because the subject has a 0 for flooring and the comparison has a 1 for flooring. To calculate the adjustment for flooring, do the following. Flooring adjustment equals 0 for the subject property minus 1 for the comparison times a $5,000 flooring adjustment. This equals a negative $5,000 adjustment because the comparison is better than the subject. Place the negative $5,000 adjustment in the cell for flooring adjustment. Complete comparison 5 adjustments. There are 3 more calculations that must be made to complete the comparison adjustment table. First, calculate the average living area for the comparisons. This is done by adding up the living areas for the 5 comparisons and dividing by 5. This results in an average living area of 1,800 square feet. Next, calculate the average adjusted price. This is done by adding up the adjusted prices of the comparisons and dividing by 5. This results in an average adjusted price of $429,400. Finally, calculate the average price per square foot of the comparisons. This is done by adding up the price per square foot for each of the comparisons and dividing by 5. This results in an average price per square foot of $241.44. Having adjusted the values of the comparisons for features, we are ready to find the value of the subject property. The buyer was willing to pay full price for this property, but I thought we could get it for less. A lot less. If you don't ask, you don't get. To find the value of the subject property, it's necessary to graph the comparisons' adjusted values. Again, the best way to do this is to use an application such as Excel. First, set up the grid, titles, and axis labels. Then plot the points of the adjusted values of the comparisons as a function of living area. Next, draw the trend line and calculate the valuation model equation. This equation means the following. The $136 per square foot is the value the home carries for the living area. The $185,000 y-intercept is the value of the land. Below the equation is something called R squared, or the coefficient of determination. This number roughly represents the fraction of the variation in the data set that can be explained by the valuation model. In this instance, the 0.94 means that 94% of the variation of the comparison's adjusted prices can be explained by the valuation model. In other words, I have a high degree of confidence that the pricing model is a good one, and any value calculated for the subject property will most likely be representative of its true value. Since the subject property is 2,081 square feet, the valuation model predicts the value of this home to be $467,000. Next, graph the average price per square foot model. Start by plotting the origin, 0, 0 on your graph. Then plot the point of average living area, average adjusted price for the comparisons, or 1,800 square feet, $429,400. Draw a line from the origin through the point of average living area and average adjusted price. Then, calculate the average price per square foot trend line equation. This is $241.44 per square foot times the living area. As we showed in the new construction example in part 1 of this series, the average price per square foot model makes the very bad assumption that the value of the land is 0. The consequence of this is that average price per square foot model overpredicts the value of homes that are greater than the average living area of the comparisons. Since the living area of the subject property is 2,081 square feet, and the comparisons have an average living area of 1,800 square feet, the average price per square foot model will overpredict the real value of the subject property. So at what price did the seller list this home? Well, $500,000, $33,000 more than our valuation model predicted. How did the seller come up with $500,000? They used average price per square foot to value their property. That's okay. Sellers almost always overprice their homes, but it's our job to determine the real value before making any offer. This is where negotiation starts. first knowing the true value. Like stated earlier, the buyer really likes this property and is willing to pay full price. But armed with this information, the buyer offers the seller $460,000. Seller makes a counteroffer of $480,000 that the buyer accepts. Now the property is under contract. 3 weeks later, the bank appraisal comes through, valuing the property at $470,000, almost identical to our valuation model's prediction of $467,000. Buyer and seller eventually agree to a selling price of $475,000 and the property closes escrow. This was a hugely successful negotiation because the buyer was willing to pay $500,000. However, because the buyer knew the true value of the property through use of these techniques, they gained $25,000 through negotiation. This is just one of many situations where I've helped buyers and sellers to save tens of thousands of dollars using the techniques developed in this series to guide negotiations. You can too, but you must take the time to do the analysis, then use this information to guide your negotiation strategy. Hope you found this series helpful. If you have questions, please post them below. If you've not already subscribed, please do so, and I will be certain to make more great videos to help you with your understanding of the real estate process. Talk with you soon.